am Amy Dumas, and this is April the 4th, 2020, and we are in the middle of a pandemic, and our medical personnel are lacking in personal protective equipment, and one of the things that has been requested are these scrub caps. And so I have created a pattern, which is in the description below, that you can click on that link. You'll get the instructions as well as the pattern to make this scrub hat. This scrub hat has elastic in the back. I have long hair. It can be tied up in a little bow. The top can be adjusted so that it can fit closer to the head, or if you have more hair, more full hair, the brim can be let down. So it fits a wide variety of our medical personnel that might need these here. This is the cap, not on my head, and I'll take this off now. But this is another one that I made, showing how the inside is done. It's a simple two-piece pattern. Let's get into how to make it. You will need 3/4 of a yard of fabric, a 3-inch piece of 1/4 inch wide elastic, scissors, pins, and thread. When you print your instructions and your pattern will be printed out on 5 sheets of paper. You will need to cut out your pattern pieces using your paper scissors, not your fabric scissors. And then you will tape the pattern pieces together where they say overlap and tape here. You'll want to tape the back sides of the pattern pieces together as well. And after you finish taping them, you'll have 2 pattern pieces. Your brim and ties will be 23 inches long. And there's your crown. You'll have your 3/4 yards of fabric laid out, folded once with the fold on top and the selvage edge facing down. You'll turn up 6 inches of the selvage edge so that you have 4 layers of fabric that are 6 inches wide. Then you will place your brim and ties pattern piece on the fabric and place the crown pattern piece along the fold on the upper edge of the fabric. Then you'll cut the fabric around the pattern. I used a rotary cutter. You can use scissors as well. When using a rotary cutter, you need pattern weights to hold down the pattern. If you don't have those, you can improvise with canned goods like I did. If you prefer, you can pin the pattern in place and cut it out with your scissors. Remember to cut the crown on the fold. And here you see my improvised pattern weights once again. Once you've got it all cut out, then you'll clip the fabric in the center to mark this is the crown, marking the center of the crown. Clip all of the notches in both the crown and the brim and ties pieces. This shows the clip on the 5-inch edge of the brim and ties piece. And this is the notch that's nearest to the tail end of the brim and ties, or the tie end of the brim and ties. This is what you have once you've got it all cut out. You have your 4 pieces of the brim and ties, and there's the crown all laid out nice and neat. Looks like a toilet seat. So here's your 4 brim and ties pieces spread out. You'll take those and lay 2 of them right sides together, and then the other 2 right sides together. You'll match your notches and pin them in place. Then you'll use a 1/4 inch seam allowance to sew both sets of the brim and ties together along that 5-inch edge. I usually just place the second piece against the first one and keep sewing, and then cut them apart once I've got them sewn. Once they're sewn, take them to the ironing board and press your seams open. Then you'll press the seams flat on the right side so that you've got a nice smooth piece of fabric. And now you have 2 long brim and ties pieces. So you'll place those 2 pieces right sides together because you're going to sew along the bottom edge. You're going to want to be sure and match up those center seams, and you'll pin the center seams where you have them matched. And then you'll match the notches that are nearest the tie ends on both ends of the brim and ties pieces, and pin those in place because you're going to start sewing there at the notches nearest the tie ends along the upper edge. So you're going to sew along that upper edge. If you have a loop turner and a point turner, you can sew along the upper edge, sew across the tie ends, and keep sewing. If you don't, leave that tie end open so that you can turn it later. So, and then you'll sew along the bottom edge. Depending on your tools, you'll either leave the other tie end open or you'll sew it closed and continue along the upper edge until you reach that other notch. If you have a loop turner and you need one, you can use it to turn the tie ends out. That's such a handy little gadget. You just reach up in there and pull it out. Then if you have a point turner and you need one, you use it to push up inside where you just turned and you can make your corners sharp. I forgot to show that you need to clip the corners and clip the seams. And that's lining them all out. If you left the tie ends open because you didn't have the loop turner and the point turner, then you'll need to use a safety pin to turn those right side out. So you can just take the safety pin and pin it through one layer of your fabric, and then you kind of push it back, pin it together, and push it back down inside the tie, and then you'll scrunch it up and keep scrunching, and then you'll reach inside there and get the safety pin and pull it through, and that will help you to turn your tie ends right side out. Once that's done, then you'll tuck the raw edges under so that you create a nice finished edge for your tie ends. And then you're going to sew along those tie ends so that that's all held in place. Once that is completed, you're going to take it over to the ironing board and open that up so that you can iron along that seam. Iron that seam open that you just made. So you have that pressed open, and try to tuck the nose of the iron deep in the tie seam where the ties are, as deep as you can go. It's just going to help you to lay that seam nice and flat when you turn it over. So you're going to fold it over, iron it again, trying to get a nice crisp edge. Press the seams flat on the tie-in. You kind of wiggle it with your fingers a little bit. And now we take the crown. We're going to bring it to the ironing board, and we're going to measure 1/4 up from the bottom edge of the crown and fold that over. And then you will press that in place because we're going to create a casing for the elastic to go in, so we can have a little bit of gather there. And once you've folded up that 1/4 inch, you'll fold up a 1/2 inch from the bottom edge to finish that casing and press that closed. Then you'll go to your machine and you're going to set your machine for its longest stitch. On my machine, that's a 5 because you want a nice long stitch. Using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you're going to sew from just above that casing, be sure and leave it open, all the way around the crown to the other casing with a long stitch. Don't lock those stitches because they're gathering stitches. You're going to want to be able to pull that thread when you need to. So that's just the 1/4 inch seam. Once you've got that sewn, you'll pull out the long tails of the thread. Make sure you don't clip it too close because you need those tails to pull. With right sides together, you're going to match the center clip of the crown with the center seam of the top edge of the brim. Then you're going to match the notch of the crown with the first notch of the brim. Along the bottom edge of the crown, you're going to let that extend 1 inch past the notch nearest the tie end of the brim and ties. You'll pin that all in place and pull one of the gathering threads to gather the fabric of the crown so that it lines up, and distribute your gathers evenly so that the edge of the crown fits along the edge of the brim and ties. It takes a little finagling, pin it all in place. You'll do the same thing on the other side of the crown to match the other side of the brim and ties. Remember to allow that bottom edge of the crown to extend 1 inch beyond that second notch of the brim and ties. You'll distribute the gathers evenly all around and again pin it in place. Remember to reset your stitch length before you begin sewing. I put mine back down to about a 2 1/2. Then you'll stitch all the way around the edge that you've just pinned with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. You kind of want to be sure that you spread the gathers out and don't let your crown, the brim and ties, wad up underneath there. Also be careful not to catch the casing. You want to leave that open for now, so just lock stitch it when you get to the casing. If you have a serger, you can serge the edges to finish the inside of this. Otherwise, set your machine to zigzag. After zigzagging around the outer edge of the seam, you're going to clip close to the zigzagged edge. This just gives a nice finished look inside the cap. The casing for the elastic is 6 inches long. This is going to be between the two ties now. You're going to cut a 1/4 inch piece of elastic 3 inches long. And then you'll take that piece of elastic and tuck the end of the elastic close to the fold of the casing and next to the edge of the seam that you just sewed. Fold that casing over and stitch over it a few times to secure the elastic in place. Then you're going to pull the elastic to the other edge of the casing and repeat the same thing. You're going to fold the casing over and stitch it right across the elastic a few times to make sure it's really secure in place. So that's what you've got now. You see the elastic inside the casing. Then you're going to stitch along that seam. So you'll sew the edge of the casing closed, along the fold rather. And stitch the edge of that casing closed. So that's, you'll kind of have to pull it as you stitch to make it lay flat. Then you fold the seam edge of the tie over the raw edge of the casing and stitch that in place. I hope you can see how that's done there. It's just to cover the raw edge of the casing. And repeat the same thing on the other side. Once you have that done, your cap is completed. That's the back of the cap. That's what you just did. This is the inside of the cap, all nice and completed. And here we have the finished cap laid out on the side, and you've already seen me wearing it. So congratulations, you're all done.